Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. I only do that 1 or 2 hours a week. My day job is I run Did It, an 85-person digital first ad agency. I also run a nonprofit in my spare time called Giving Forward. I'm lucky enough to be joined by Kara Goldin, who's the founder and CEO of Hint. Um, she was kind enough to not only send me her book, her current book ahead of time, but also some free samples of product and an Undaunted
Oh,
T-shirt,
I
which I of
love
course
it.
have to wear. You got to wear the swag when you do the interview. That's part of the rule. I don't have the hat handy, so I can't put that on. So thanks so much for joining me, Kara. And I had a chance to read the book, and within the book title, you call yourself an accidental entrepreneur. So I'd like to hear sort of how you described yourself that way, and what the catalyst was for you to sort of take that path of turning Hint into what it is today, which I enjoy a lot, and I have one right here with me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for the nice introduction. And yeah, it's interesting. Over the years, I feel like people have asked me many questions, but one of them, that did I always know I wanted to be an entrepreneur? And the answer is no. And frankly, I know there's a lot of people out there who say, especially college students or new college grads, who are like, I have always known I've wanted to be an entrepreneur. And that wasn't the case for me, but I certainly had the training. I worked for some, either directly or indirectly, some incredible entrepreneurs, including at CNN, Ted Turner, and then moved out to Silicon Valley and worked for a spin out of Apple that was an idea that Steve Jobs had. And then, of course, at America Online, which is where I was at prior to founding Hint, Steve Case. So I, I think that the key thing that I learned about in all of those previous environments was that it starts with an idea, and you stay curious along the way, and you keep asking questions, and your ability to uh, keep asking questions and keep growing. I think growing up in tech in many ways, and jumping over to consumer products or beverage was just, I learned a lot, and probably, a big reason why I wanted to get my book and my learnings out there was that I felt like there were things along the way that I learned. And, not only that I didn't, didn't think I was going to become an entrepreneur, but kind of growing up in media and tech, where you always have 2.0 or upgrades, and then jumping into the beverage industry, where you launch a product, and if it's not doing well, you yank it, right? And it was just, I didn't sort of look at it that way because I didn't know any better, right? And so I think that it's when I think about being an accidental entrepreneur, I think about it as it was satisfying my curiosity. I had a problem to solve, just like so many of these other founders that I had worked for, and it was so clear to me. But what I didn't know, and also going along with this accidental entrepreneur concept, is I'm not only an accidental entrepreneur, but I'm an accidental category creator, because I didn't realize until 2 months in that part of the challenge with launching my company, and frankly launching ideas in general, is when there's no one else out there doing what you're doing, you could be launching an entirely new category, which frankly just takes time. It takes time. It takes money too, but it really takes time for the consumer, or for the end recipient, who's ever going to be kind of controlling your destination. In our case, either the consumer or the person who was making decisions to get our product on the shelf at Whole Foods or Safeway or whatever. So when you're ahead, you just need enough money to be able to stay there until people catch up, if you believe that that's really what the key problem is.
Right, right. I mean, there's like a subtitle to the general title of Undaunted where you talk about it's overcoming doubts and doubters,
Mhm.
right? And one of my favorite lines of the book, which I think comes up at least twice, is the condescending conversation you had, or with a conversation with a cola executive who essentially made a condescending remark to you about the fact that like it would never work, like, really spoke down to you, and it seemed like that actually energized you as opposed to dissuading you in any way. And I just sort of love that because that's the doubter side. Like obviously you always have your own doubts, but when somebody externally sort of almost throws the gauntlet down and challenges you, it seems like you took that as like, okay, now I'm going to prove them wrong.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there was definitely that moment. I mean, there's a lot there based on even what you were saying. I mean, the when you when you have your own doubts, and everybody does have doubts, that's a very powerful thing, right? And you have to figure out how you can move forward, right? That's the key component to it. And I was definitely there, but I assumed that, I mean, I remember getting ready to have that meeting with a Coca-Cola executive, very senior level executive, and being really prepared, being really excited, and kind of hanging on every single word that he was going to say. And then it did energize me primarily because that was the point when I realized something that my dad used to say to me. It was like, when I guess when somebody would say something to me that I, wasn't happy about growing up, he's like, consider the source. And I kept hearing that in my head. And I think it's so true because you think that because somebody's got years and years of experience or they're working for a multi-billion-dollar company that they matter, right?
Yeah.
That whatever they say, I'm sure I mean, he probably thought, okay, I talked to this nice woman and now we hung up the phone and she's probably gonna, kill the company now, right? And close it down, which I didn't, obviously. But I think that, words are such powerful things. And especially when you're vulnerable, and how many times do those words stop people? I mean, in your industry, if somebody's been, sitting in advertising for years and years, right? But they don't really understand maybe the digital side of the world. Your first glance is, will they matter? Because they've been there for a long time. Maybe they're a dinosaur, but they've been there for a long time. But they're just saying what they think. It doesn't mean anything more than what they think, I
Right.
guess, is where I'm going with this. So I think that that's a really important point that I try to drive home in the book, is that, just because somebody has more experience or more money, or, that doesn't mean that what they say matters. And I don't think they necessarily even intend. They're just giving an opinion,
Yeah.
and you're asking for it, and which is fine. And I think that kind of leads to sort of the other point, which is, it's not that I didn't listen and I didn't hear. I just collected, right? Along the way, I collected all these differing opinions. And I think great entrepreneurs do that. I think that they meet with as many people as they can to get opinions, and just in every industry. But the key is, do you have the ability to keep moving forward? Do you have the creativity to not stop, right? Because another thing I talk about in the book is complacency will kill you, will kill the company, will kill you, right? You have to keep moving. And I think that is such an important piece when you're thinking about, anybody who throws words out there. You're inviting them to give an opinion. Sometimes you ask, sometimes you don't ask, but will that actually stop you from moving your idea to the next step if you believe that it's got legs?
Right. Right. Absolutely. The obviously busy executives often don't have time to write a book, but yet I wrote three and you wrote one so far. So I'm sort of curious, why did you write it? What made you compelled to feel like, okay, I've got a book in me too. Like, I know I'm busy running a company, but I have to get this book out there.
Yeah. So over the last few years, I've been invited to speak at conferences at, different companies, where primarily talking about building a company that matters and mission driven, purpose driven, how I went from one industry in tech to, doing something that I really felt like had meaning and purpose. And I think it was like the Q&A session at the end that always got me, where usually they were questions that I had heard in the past, but sometimes there were these questions where I thought, did I really answer that question? And I would go back to my hotel room and almost use it as a prompt to start writing in a journal, and to think, okay, if I get that question the next time, here are some examples of where I saw, because I always have believed that sharing stories is often easier than actually answering questions,
Right.
especially for audiences and maybe audiences that aren't even in your industry. And so that was kind of, the initial step. But then I also started receiving so many comments and back from people who had heard me speak, and they said, you really helped me to get unstuck. And what I thought was so interesting is many of these people were entrepreneurs, but many of these people were not entrepreneurs. They were just executives that were thinking about, why am I doing what I'm doing every single day? Maybe I should go do something else. Oh, wait, she's really fearless. She loves taking risks. And then they would hear that I that's not me at all. And then they'd start to rethink their life just based on a 1 hour talk with me. And I thought, gosh, if I could get these notes out to more people that maybe don't have the opportunity to go to a conference or sit inside of a company that is hiring me to talk to them, then I could really help a lot of people, which is frankly the reason why I started Hint, was to help people. And so that was the thinking. And initially I thought, can I just bind my 600-page journal that I had written over the last 5 years and get it out to people? And I was sharing with a girlfriend of mine who has written multiple books, and she said, you mean you want to write a book? And I said, no, that's too much, too daunting. I run a company. How could I do that? And then when I, realized that it was my task was really editing it down. And so I think that was, people ask me, what was the hardest part about writing a book? It was actually, cutting things out that, and because I wanted to get it down to 200-ish pages. And of course I didn't want all my stories cut. So I probably have book 2 already, in the lock. So
Absolutely. Well, you just mentioned risk, and that was one of my next questions, was this idea that having read your book, and certainly the general press loves to sort of weave these tales of risk-taking entrepreneurs, right? But I can only speak for myself, and to you, having read your book, that you seem much more calculated in your sort of risk taking, and that it wasn't sort of risk taking for risk taking's sake. It's really more like a dogged perseverance once you believe that you're on the right path, right? I'm a stoic philosophically, so I think it sort of, for me, weaves into that, like, know the things you can control and the things you can't. Focus on the things
totally.
you can, right? And so I'm curious sort of how you framed yourself as you were sort of taking what was obviously a high risk endeavor, you know, with your husband, right? So you're actually risking the entire family, not just your
Totally.
own future, but the entire family's future as you went down this path. So how would you sort of contrast that with the sort of the way the general press talks about entrepreneurs and risk?
Yeah, I think that it's always kind of bothered me that they look at, every entrepreneur as a risk taker. Instead, what I see in every entrepreneur is endless curiosity, right? And I think that, the best entrepreneurs have endless curiosity, but also can hire a team to help them execute, right, the strategy. And, as I always say to entrepreneurs, ideas are a dime a dozen. I mean, they really are, unless you can actually figure out how to execute and keep the team moving forward and hire the great people to support you. And, again, I think that you think, oh yeah, you can just go hire people. It's, super easy. When you have an idea that very few people understand because you're building a new category, or, I think Steve Jobs used to talk about, like support the crazies, right? Because their idea may not resonate with you right now, but later, like, can you imagine? I mean, you think these people are crazy, and then you're going to support them. You're going to, go get a paycheck from them when they've never, done this before. They are, in my case, taking on Coke and Pepsi. I mean, that was sort of the giveaway versus actually how I perceived it as helping change health in America. Even crazier to so many people. They thought, what's wrong with diet sweeteners? This is 16 years ago. So again, I think I think it's staying focused on how do you continue moving forward. And I think that topic in particular leads me to even how I do it on, how I think about it in my own life. It's not that I don't have goals, but I take that goal and I put it on the shelf, right? And I know it's there, but instead I figure out every single day what I can be working on that's going to continue to keep this company going, right? And I think that is, complacency will kill you, but I think that's the most important thing, is not allowing any wall to get so big, always figuring out what can we do. And oftentimes as a founder, it's a lonely position to be sitting there as, founder and CEO, and, and saying to everybody, okay, what can we do? We've lost a piece of business. Like, next time, we have to have more options. We have to diversify. We have to keep thinking about that when everybody else is really relying on you. And I know you've, been in this position. I mean, any founder has been in this position. It's hard to describe it to people who haven't kind of lived it, right? But I think that the exciting thing that I have from the book too is that so many people have read it and have said, like, this is such an honest assessment of, really what happens in this process. And again, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. It's really a, here's kind of what happens. It's a juggling act.
Right. Well, clearly some of the readers of your book and potentially some of the listeners to this conversation will sort of want to be undaunted as well, right? But they also don't want to go down a rabbit hole where the ending will not work out in their favor, right? So to them, how do you tell them how to be undaunted, but you sort of remain, grounded at the same time?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, I don't think entrepreneurism is for everyone. And I really think that it's, there's a lot of aspects in sort of a, DNA, or I don't even know if it's DNA that you have to have. You have to be able to, brush yourself off and get back up again and keep moving. There are days where there's highs and there's lows. And I think that it's, it is, it's a lot. And I think that it's being able to do that in a way and, still do everything else that you want to do is a choice, right? That it's, and I think that was something that I also saw that I had. I mean, I always felt like when people would say to me when I was starting a company, they'd say, why didn't you stay in tech? I mean, you were doing so well. And I kept thinking that if things didn't work out at Hint, then I could go back to tech. I mean, if everybody thought I was doing awesome, oftentimes I wasn't the one, or I was the only one saying that, though. I mean, it was amazing. As I always think about family and friends, like, they don't intend to be this way, but they're the worst, right? They sit here, they create gloom and like, what are you doing? Why would you do that? And, but again, I kept thinking, I could go back and nobody would agree with me on that. They'd say, well, I don't know. I mean, you've been out for, a couple years. And I'd say, well, how much, like, how long could I stay out and then go back? And they'd make something up. Again, going back to the words, like how powerful it is. And so again, I think that you really have to figure out if this is, the the journey that you want to go on. I think that, another thing that I think about a lot is being able to look back at your successes along the way. And certainly when you, look at times that were really, really tough, it's definitely, you have some hard days and some real challenges. But then when you look back and think about how you got through those challenges, especially when you come up on another challenge, like the pandemic, right? Where all those little challenging times prior to, the last 16 months for me really allowed me to be prepared. And I think that that's something that I'm really, really grateful for and thankful for, because I think it's something where I look at some of my other friends and, they're maybe not as happy as me, maybe not as confident, because they haven't been through the same kind of battles that I've been through along the way. But as somebody said to me earlier this morning, you're still smiling.
Yeah.
You're still like, there's days that are, ugly, and they get better. But then, some days you go 4 steps forward and then you go 1 step back, and you got to spend a little more time on that and then keep going. So, but I love running into people who, knew us 15 years ago and still putting cases of hint in my Grand Cherokee and driving them to stores. And I think that it's a lot of fun to meet those people who, really are invested in the journey as well, that they watched it from the beginning. They saw, the challenging times, and they're like, God, that must be so neat and so cool. And I think more and more people would want to experience it if they could, kind of have a crystal ball to sort of see how it would turn out. But there's always the possibility that it doesn't turn out, and you have to be willing to, take that gamble.
Yeah, well, riding the roller coaster is not for everyone at the amusement park, right? You have to enjoy the roller
Totally.
coaster.
Right.
So I agree
Right.
with you there, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things that I really enjoyed about the book, and now have managed to experience firsthand, is the fact that beverage companies, other than Nestle and water, right? There's not a lot of beverage companies that go DTC, right? Other than sort of non-flavored water delivery, or maybe they'll do seltzer as well. Generally it's sort of like, oh, beverages, like who in their right mind would ship beverages? But it ends up my daughter really loves the watermelon flavor, right? And every store I go to, it's just the multi-flavor pack, right? And so I can't get just the watermelon. The only other single flavor pack they have is this one, right? Which I enjoy. I think it's the blackberry, right?
Yep.
And so that's fine for me. But to get the watermelons, if I buy the cases, all the watermelons are gone within like a day, right? And then everyone else has to drink the rest. So I was so happy that I saw an ad for you guys running a DTC special, right? A week and a half ago. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to order 3 cases of watermelon. So now I got 3 cases of watermelon. So now we're set. Like, my daughter can raid the watermelon. And it was sort of a great way that you sort of addressed the shelf space issue, right?
Yeah.
Because you're fighting over shelf space. And even in the suburbs where there's plenty of shelf space, you can never get every one of your SKUs on the shelf, right?
Well, and that's right. And it's interesting thinking back even 16 years ago, everybody in the beverage industry told me to focus on stores, right? And of course I was a consumer of drinks, and so I would go into the stores and buy product. I'd come from direct to consumer, and so I knew direct to consumer prior to starting the company, but I still didn't believe. I had actually lived through the web van days in the Bay Area, and had seen, I used to have web van come into my home and open up my refrigerator and stock it. It was a beautiful thing. And then it went away because the economic, like I understood it really, really well. But what I realized along our journey is we went into Google and Facebook, and we were in their micro kitchens. In fact, we were in Google for the first couple of years of their micro kitchens. We were the only product in there. I mean, we grew this business inside of Google, and you have to understand that employees of Google, especially in the early days, were eating all of their meals at Google. They had, chefs coming in and cooking. And so you had people who like never went to the grocery store, but yet they wanted some drinks in their refrigerator at home. And so they would reach out to us and even ask us to deliver cases, for them to take home. I mean, it was just, it was crazy. So it was this pull strategy that kind of started happening. And we thought, gosh, we think that this could be bigger, because it was about 15% of our overall business at the beginning of the pandemic was offices. It was, not 50, but it was about 15%. And I would say at least half of those people that have tried our product or drink a lot of our product inside of a lot of these tech offices, they don't grocery shop. I mean, they're millennials. Maybe they go to Costco once a month, but we weren't even in Costco up until this last year. So there were these patterns and trends that we were seeing in our consumer. And it's not that we weren't focused on the stores. We've always been focused on the stores. But what we realized is that there were consumers like you who had never really thought about ordering our product online. And then once they did it, they thought, oh, this is way easier. I get the right selection that my family wants. It's convenient. I don't have to carry a heavy case home. All of these factors are kind of no-brainers. And again, I think people have always asked, how were you able to, figure out shipping for such a heavy product? We were one of the first food companies, to go to FedEx Ground and approach them about this idea. And again, I think coming from the tech industry and sort of knowing what we knew, we just showed up and we just started saying, hey, like Amazon ships a lot of products and they don't use FedEx Ground. What if we worked with you? So the net of it is we got an incredible rate, or because we were one of the first, and we figured it out. And, we worked closely with FedEx to learn through us as well. So it was a great opportunity.
Yeah, I got the sense, I don't know for sure, obviously, but I got the sort of sense just based on the delivery schedule that, there was probably some latitude as to arrival date. Like I sort of felt like, oh, it'll get here eventually, via FedEx Ground. It took maybe a little bit longer than I expected because you get spoiled with Amazon's delivery
Yeah.
speed. But,
Well, I
beverage,
think
it's not that key, right? It doesn't have to arrive, within a short window.
Well, I think what you're also feeling right now as a consumer is that it's an unprecedented number of packages that is, going from point A to point B, because more and more people are opting for direct to consumer. So, what the pandemic sped up, I think, is this direct to consumer opportunity where it is more convenient. You do get the right selection, all of these factors. And I think FedEx and UPS and USPS are just totally overwhelmed. And it's just, they've increased prices, but in addition to that, they don't have enough people. They don't have enough drivers, which is like, it's across the board for, workers right now, are just not getting those people there. So the delays, I think, are really unprecedented. And unfortunately, as a manufacturer, we're sort of at the mercy of these, delivery companies. And so I think for us, just sort of, you look at all the Amazon trucks that are out there, and kind of that last mile delivery opportunity that's out there. And I think that's become clearer and clearer, because the consumer, they want the convenience, but they also want it tomorrow. And so I think what Amazon is doing is brilliant. It's annoying, right? If you're I mean, we sell tons of product through Amazon as well. But definitely if you don't have all those trucks that Amazon is loading up and really focused on this last mile delivery opportunity, that it's it's taking too long.
Cool. Well, I'm a big fan of sort of customer segmentation and understanding sort of where your power customers are, and then maybe messaging slightly differently to different segments. I'm sort of curious, have you guys identified any sort of uniquely different personas within your customer set that maybe have slightly different motivations and buy for different reasons?
So I think there's a lot of people that are buying our product because, like me, they didn't love the taste of water. They aspired to be water drinkers, but they found water boring, so they just never did it. So there's a lot of those people, but there are a number of people, and this has only increased over the last 16 years, that have health issues. So type 2 diabetes, I didn't even know what type 2 diabetes was 16 years ago. About 2% of the population had type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes. Today, 40 to 45% of the population has type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes. So it's a regulation and of sugar levels, sweet levels, and it's it's fascinating to me how many of these people are claiming that diet sweeteners are really the thing that is throwing their body off, and they're not able to process it in the right way. So I feel like, frankly, that satisfies my own curiosity. When I started hearing from consumers early on that was why they were drinking our drink. And then also another health segment that we hit is people who are going through some sort of treatment, cancer treatments in particular. So the metallic taste that you get in your mouth when you're going through chemo, a lot of cancer patients are drinking hint to mask the metallic taste, which is fascinating. Like, nowhere, we don't market to those people. We don't, talk about our drink as the cancer drink. I mean, anti-cancer drink. But I think it's really fascinating that it's sort of bubbled up as a drink for this segment. But I think what it really speaks to is that it's a drink for people who are choosing health and really want health. And I think that if nothing great came out of the pandemic over the last 16 months, it's the one thing is that people all over the world are focused on staying healthy, right? I mean, it's just, I'm hearing it everywhere, all over the world, where people are saying, I don't want to get this virus. I had this virus and I know I need to keep my body healthy. And so putting what you put in your body becomes a very thoughtful thing, right? And maybe even more so over the last, year and a half. So I think that is, I would say that segment has grown significantly. I also, just to add one little piece of information in the platform, I decided, as my kids, my Gen Zers were on TikTok about a year and a half ago. I was curious about it. And so I went on TikTok and was trying to figure out who was on there and the audiences. And I started my own TikTok, which has grown significantly. I think it's at almost 31,000 followers now. But what I find interesting about that audience that is different than the other platforms that I'm on is that these are the kids of many of the buyers that have been going to Whole Foods. So maybe your daughter, for example, where, she's coming on, and the reason why they're following me is I'm talking about the entrepreneurial journey. And I'm talking about the idea that just go out and do it, right? Come up with an idea. And a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about in my talks, or, to you on the podcast, I'm making little segments and then I'm putting it on TikTok. And the audience that is on there is a lot of Gen Zers, young millennials, who really aspire to be entrepreneurs. And what I am sharing with them is it's not for everybody. And, it's a really hard job. You don't, snap your finger and turn into a unicorn. And, all these things that I know as well.
Great, great. Well, I have two final questions that relate to the book, and you can decide how you want to answer them. The first is an easy one. Is there still a stash of AOL umbrellas somewhere in the corner of your house?
I've got a few. I still do. I wasn't going to give them away, but you'll have to read the book to understand the humor in that.
And the other question that relates to the book is, you and John McCain had a conversation where you were trying to decide something. You don't have to tell us how you decided it, but did you come to a decision one way or the other?
I think that one of the things I think back on a lot, and there were so many points that John had said along the way that, I think back on. Again, looking backwards is often, much more fun and interesting, and understanding what you learned along the way. But I think that one of the things that I learned from John is that you can actually change along the way. And in 2012, he actually talked about, that decision that kind of bothered me when I was in his office around not supporting Martin Luther King Day. And I didn't understand why he hadn't voted to support it. And in 2012, he talked about that was a really bad decision that he had made. And I think that what I've realized is that people make bad decisions along the way, but the real people, the people that are, the most noble in my mind, are the ones that can actually own their mistakes, right? And talk about how they saw things and how they needed to be enlightened in some way in order to change, and how they were wrong, right? And I think about that conversation a lot, because he was already pretty high on the pedestal for me, but even just went up higher when he actually owned somebody as big and large as he was. When you can own that there's a lot of lessons there.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hope the society gets back to forgiving people who own up to their mistakes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think there's a little bit less tolerance for that, perhaps. But I think, the pendulum swings back and forth. So we'll have to see where that goes.
Hopefully.
Thanks so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure chatting about business and philosophy and entrepreneurship. And I look forward to continuing the conversation in the future.
Thank you so much.